Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to go over the bail application for Rex Heuermann, also known as the Long Island serial killer. Yesterday, in a press conference, we learned that he's charged with the murder of Valerie Mack. This is Valerie Mack. She was found dismembered some years ago. I do want to let you know before I share this document, I don't know how to make it any clearer to where you could read it better. If anybody has any suggestions on that, please let me know. I would love to be able to make this where you guys can see it better and read it better. I just don't know how to do that while I'm recording it. So if you guys have any suggestions on how to make it better than 720 or whatever it is, please let me know. I'm using StreamYard. Thank you. So this is the bail application I have. My lovely friend Zio helped me put the watermarks on the back. So that's what the back is. It's my watermark. So with that, we'll get started. This is the bail application for indictment number 71635-24. It's the Supreme Court of Suffolk County, State of New York, the people of the State of New York against Rex A. Heuermann, who is the defendant. And it starts. On July 14th, 2023, defendant Rex A. Heuermann was charged by a grand jury with the following 6 counts, which have been incorporated into Suffolk County Indictment Number 71889-23. The first charge is murder in the first degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Melissa Bartholomew on or about July 10, 2009. Murder in the first degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Megan Waterman on or about June 6, 2010. Murder in the first degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section 125.27, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Amber Costello on or about September 2nd, 2010. Murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Melissa Bartholomew on or about July 10, 2009. Murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Megan Waterman on or about June 6, 2010. And murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, a Class A1 violent felony and the death of Amber Costello on or about September 2nd, 2010. On January 16, 2024, defendant Rex A. Heuermann was charged by the grand jury in a superseding indictment, Suffolk County Indictment Number 70126-24, which incorporated not only the above counts, but the additional charge of murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes on or about July 9, 2007. Today, defendant Rex A. Heuermann stands before this court charged by a grand jury in another superseding indictment, which incorporates each and every one of the above counts, as well as the additional charges of murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Jessica Taylor on or about or between July 21st through the 26th, 2003, and murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section A Class A1 violent felony for the death of Sandra Costello on or about and between November 19th through the 20th, 1993. The people filed a written bail application at Rex A. Heuermann's initial arraignment, which occurred on July 14, 2023, as well as a defendant's arraignment on the initial superseding indictment, which occurred on January 16, 2024. Those applications are annexed hereto as Exhibit A. On July 14, 2023, the Honorable Richard Ambrose ordered that defendant Rex A. Heuermann be remanded without bail. The matter was subsequently adjourned to August 1st, 2023, before the Honorable Timothy Mazzei. On August 1st, 2023, and in the ensuing appearances that have followed, this court has continued to remand the defendant without bail. Set forth below is the people's bail application in support of the new superseding indictment, which will expand on additional evidentiary developments in this investigation, now charging defendant Heuermann with the murders of 2 additional victims, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costello. Based on defendant Heuermann's indictment on additional murder charges as it pertains to now a 5th and 6th victim, the serious and heinous nature of these serial murders, the planning and forethought that went into these crimes, the strength of the people's case, the length of incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extended period of time that this defendant was able to avoid apprehension, and the remaining facts set forth herein as contained within Exhibit A, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure defendant Rex A. Heuermann returns to court is to remand him without bail. The 2003 and 2011 discovery of human remains of Jessica Taylor. On or about July 26, 2003, an individual whose identity is known to law enforcement hereinafter as Witness 1 was walking his or her dog just west of Halsey Manor Road, Manorville, Suffolk County, New York. At this time, Witness 1 observed what appeared to be human remains, which prompted him or her to call 911. Upon arrival, members of the SCPD observed the remains of a female later identified as Jessica Taylor. Miss Taylor was found lying on her back with her legs bent underneath her. Notably, the victim was decapitated, and both of Miss Taylor's arms had been severed from her body below her elbows. Moreover, a tattoo on the victim's torso had been severely obliterated by a sharp object. Investigators believe the mutilation of the victim's tattoo, decapitation of her head, and dismemberment of Miss Taylor's arms were acts perpetrated by Rex A. Heuermann to, inter alia, inhibit the identification of the victim via facial recognition, fingerprints, and or tattoo identification. During the initial investigation in Manorville in 2003, the victim's head, arms, and hands were not found at the scene, and their location remained unknown to law enforcement for approximately 8 years. On March 29, 2011, Miss Taylor's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered along Ocean Parkway just east of Gilgo Beach, Suffolk County, New York. Notably, Miss Taylor's remains were located on the same side of the road from where Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waters, and Amber Costello, hereinafter as the Gilgo Four, had been found just several months prior in December 2010. Each of the Gilgo Four victims, as well as the skull, hands, and forearm of Miss Taylor, were recovered on the same side of the road at a depth of within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway. Furthermore, Miss Taylor's remains were located less than a mile from where the Gilgo Four were discovered. See embedded image on the following page. So in this image, it tells us that marker number 1, which is right here, that's Jessica Taylor. She was found 50 feet from the pavement. Number 2 is Maureen Brainerd Barnes. She is right here where this little pin mark is. She was found 33 feet and 3 inches from the pavement. Melissa Bartholomew is number 3. She was found 27 feet and 2 inches from the pavement. Megan Waterman is marker number 4. She was found 22 feet and 9 inches from the pavement. And Amber Costello is marker number 5. She was found 29 feet and 5 inches from the pavement. This box is a zoomed in picture of this box right here with the yellow dot inside of it. Information relevant to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor. Jessica Taylor was last seen on or about July 19, 2003 in New York City. The investigation to date has established that in July 2003, Ms. Taylor was working as a sex worker in the area of Midtown Manhattan. On July 21, 2003, at approximately 8:41 p.m., Ms. Taylor utilized her cellular phone, hereinafter as Taylor Phone, to speak to her mother. Based on witness interviews and an analysis of telephone records, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that the two spoke for approximately 7 minutes. During that call, Ms. Taylor had arranged to visit her mother on July 25, 2003, in Poughkeepsie, New York, for her mother's birthday. Less than 2 hours later, at approximately 10:22 p.m., the Taylor phone placed an outgoing call which lasted approximately 2 minutes. Thereafter, the Taylor phone records reveal no further outgoing calls or accepted incoming calls. On or about July 25, 2003, when her daughter failed to arrive at her Poughkeepsie residence or answer any phone calls, Ms. Taylor's mother notified law enforcement. At the time of Miss Taylor's disappearance, Rex A. Heuermann worked in the same vicinity as where Miss Taylor was known to, quote, street walk, i.e., work as a sex worker. Records seized during the execution of prior search warrants reveal Heuermann was in fact present in Midtown Manhattan on July 21, 2003, the same date Miss Taylor disappeared. on July 26, 2003, and in the days thereafter, members of the SCPD canvassed the area around Halsey Manor Road in Manorville, in the vicinity of where Miss Taylor's remains had been found. As a result, investigators spoke to a witness who had on July 25, 2003 at approximately 10:30 p.m. observed a dark-colored Chevrolet pickup truck backed into the same wooded area where Miss Taylor's body was later found. Based upon their investigation, law enforcement determined that these observations would have occurred approximately 13 hours before Witness 1's 911 call. Notably, the investigation to date has established that defendant Rex Heuermann purchased a 2002 dark-colored Chevrolet Avalanche pickup truck on or about March 22, 2002 from Ramp Chevrolet in Port Jefferson Station, New York. Accordingly, on July 25, 2003 at 10:30 p.m., defendant Heuermann would have been in possession of a vehicle matching the description of the one observed in the vicinity of where Miss Taylor's remains had been found on Halsey Manor Road. A forensic analysis of Rex A. Heuermann's digital devices also revealed the following. 1. That on or about July 28, 2003, Rex A. Heuermann accessed a Newsday article entitled, quote, "Cops Seek Help in IDing Manorville Body," regarding the discovery of Miss Taylor's human remains. That online activity was subsequently deleted, and 2. On or about July 29, 2003, Rex A. Heuermann conducted an internet search for a Chevrolet Avalanche, despite his 2002 Avalanche being just over 1 year old. See embedded image below. The analysis further shows Heuermann also attempted to delete the search for a new vehicle. ID. Notably, this activity occurred just days after Miss Taylor was discovered and just days after witnesses observed a vehicle matching the physical description of Heuermann's leaving the scene. This is hard to see, but it tells us that he was searching for a 2003 Chevrolet Avalanche. He was looking for the exterior color of Arrival Blue. He accessed this search on July 29, 2003 at 4 a.m. and then he tried to delete it July 29th at 3:27 p.m. Finally, while the make and model of the vehicle Heuermann searched for is the same as his 2002 vehicle, a Chevrolet Avalanche pickup truck, the exterior color is different, i.e. Arrival Blue. See embedded image below, as well as another in Summit White, which are significantly brighter exterior paint offerings by Chevrolet when compared to Heuermann's dark green 2002 Chevrolet Avalanche. And that's a picture of the truck in Arrival Blue. Hairs recovered from the remains of Jessica Taylor. During the course of the investigation, Miss Taylor's body was examined by a forensic scientist with the Suffolk County Crime Lab. Hairs recovered from the remains of Jessica Taylor. During the course of this investigation, Miss Taylor's body was examined by a forensic scientist with the Suffolk County Crime Lab, hereinafter referred to as SCCL, which revealed that Miss Taylor had been decapitated, dismembered at her arms below her elbows, and revealed, quote, irregular disruption of the victim's nipples and the, quote, obliteration of her tattoo. There is a footnote that tells us, witnesses from the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office have determined that the, quote, irregular disruption of the victim's nipples did not occur naturally, and one possible cause of such disruption is the post-mortem mutilation of the victim's nipples. During the examination of Miss Taylor's body, a male human hair was recovered, specifically from a surgical drape that had been underneath the victim, hereinafter referred to as male hair underneath Taylor. A subsequent examination of the male hair underneath Taylor led to the determination that it was a human head hair with Caucasian European characteristics. However, it was, based on the DNA testing capabilities at the SCCL, unsuitable for further DNA testing at that time. On or about August 24, 2003, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor to an outside forensics laboratory previously referred to in Exhibit A as Forensic Laboratory Number 2, which specializes in forensic mitochondrial analysis. On or about February 1st, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair underneath Taylor and the profile developed from defendant's buccal swab are the same. specifically at a rate that would, as per EMPOP database, exclude 99.96 of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered underneath the decapitated and dismembered remains of Jessica Taylor. There is a footnote that states EMPOP is shorthand for the European DNA Profile Group, or EDNAP, Mitochondrial DNA Population Database, which is a web-based collection of human mitochondrial sequence data from various populations worldwide. The North American database includes 12,386 sequences of North American forensic significance. 99.96 of the North American population can be excluded as the contributor of the male hair underneath Taylor. Defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as the contributor of the said hair recovered underneath the remains of Jessica Taylor. On or about March 8, 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor and a DNA extract of Rex A. Heuermann's buccal swab to an outside independent laboratory previously referred to in Exhibit A as Forensic Laboratory Number 1, which applies DNA techniques and direct genome sequencing in difficult-to-solve forensic casework and the identification of human remains. On or about April 29, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 1 issued a report indicating it had developed a nuclear DNA profile for not only the male hair underneath Taylor, but also from Rex A. Heuermann's buccal swab. Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was able to conduct a one-to-one atmospherical nuclear DNA comparison between said profile, developed from the male hair underneath Taylor, to Rex A. Heuermann's SNP genome type file, developed from his buccal swab, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the male hair underneath Taylor is a 1.837 by 10 to the 603rd times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex Heuermann's SNP genotype file than from any unrelated individual. And there is a footnote. The 1.87 by 10 to the 603rd power statistic and the following statistical probabilities are provided in scientific notation. The standard notation for 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power is 1,837 with 600 zeros thereafter. Based on the foregoing, it is significant that two forensic laboratories have now independently determined that the aforementioned hair recovered from the surgical drape underneath the remains of Jessica Taylor are substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identical to defendant Heuermann's mitochondrial and nuclear profiles, which provide further support that Rex A. Heuermann murdered, dismembered, decapitated, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor to Mannersville and Gilgo Beach until the victims' remains were ultimately discovered in July 2003 and March 2011, respectively. Heuermann's family travel in relation to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor. As part of the ongoing investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has also established that Heuermann's wife and children were out of state at the time of Miss Taylor's disappearance and murder, a consistent theme attributable to the defendant for each of the charged homicides thus far, which would have allowed the defendant unfettered time and opportunity to execute those crimes. Specifically, in 2002 to 2003, defendant Heuermann's daughter, Victoria, was a kindergarten student at the elementary school located in Massapequa Park, New York. At the time, Victoria was classmates with an individual whose identity is also known to law enforcement hereinafter as Witness 2. Based on post-arrest interview with witnesses, including Witness 2's family and Victoria, the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force has learned that at the conclusion of the kindergarten school year, Miss Ellerup and her two children vacationed with Witness Number 2's family from on or about July 20th, 2003 through on or about July 27th, 2003 at Smuggler's Notch Resort, which is located in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Rex A. Heuermann did not attend this trip. These witness accounts have been corroborated via telephone records and electronic data seized during the execution of the July 2023 search warrants. For example, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized AT&T records, which detail calls made to and from the Heuermann residence in July 2003. See embedded excerpt on the following page. These records show that during the aforementioned family vacation, the landline telephone associated with the Huerman residence, which was located at the address in Massapequa Park, hereinafter as Target Residence, made several phone calls to a telephone number bearing an 802 area code. Further investigation has tied this phone number to Smuggler's Notch Resort. Thus, investigators believe defendant Huerman made these calls from Target Residence in Massapequa Park to his family staying in Jeffersonville, Vermont. And right here we have the AT&T record from July 11th through August 10th, 2003. It states on July 22nd, he called them at 1:41 p.m. and talked for 2 minutes. On July 22nd, he called them at 6:25 p.m. and talked for 16 minutes. On July 26th, he called them at 10:31 and talked for 16 minutes. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force also seized records attributable to Huerman's Manhattan business, RH Consultants and Associates. These records further corroborate Huerman's stay in New York and the family's travel to Jeffersonville, Vermont, as Huerman's work landline makes numerous calls during the same week of July 20th through the 27th, 2003, from Manhattan, New York to the Smuggler's Notch Resort. See embedded image. And this is another phone bill. It tells us the account name is RH Consultants and Associates. And down here at the bottom in the box in red, it tells us that on July 21st, he called them and talked for 1.3 minutes. On July 21st, he called them and talked for 3.1 minutes. On July 21st, he called Omaha, Nebraska and talked for 0.5 minute or 30 seconds. On July 24th, he called them and talked for 1.1 minute. And on July 24th, he called them and talked for 2.7 minutes. Finally, in July 2003, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized a hard drive from the basement of Target Residence. An extraction and analysis of that hard drive revealed that it contained a Palm Pilot backup file, which appeared to contain defendant Huerman's, quote, date book or calendar for relevant dates. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force subsequently hired a digital forensics expert who, by utilizing native Palm software, was able to convert the above data into a readable format. And this tells us the date book for Rex Huerman. It tells us on Sunday the 20th, he says, wife in VT at Smugs. Monday the 21st, wife in VT at Smugs. Tuesday the 22nd, they're at Smugs. Wednesday the 23rd, they're at Smugs. Thursday the 24th, wife and VT at Smugs. Friday the 25th at Smugs. Saturday the 26th at Smugs. Sunday the 27th at Smugs. And there's that if you guys want to look at it for a second. Based on the foregoing, the information to date has clearly established defendant Huerman's wife and children were indeed located out of state during the time of Jessica Taylor's disappearance, which occurred on or about July 21st, 2003. Accordingly, the murders of all 4 charged victims and now, quote, the murder of Miss Taylor occurred at times when defendant Huerman's wife and children were located out of state, which would have allowed defendant Huerman unfettered time to execute his plans for Miss Taylor, which included the decapitation, dismemberment, and transportation of her remains without any fear that his family would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. The 1993 discovery of human remains of Sandra Costello. On or about November 20th, 1993, 2 individuals, while hunting in a wooded area of Southampton in the vicinity of 50 Old Fish Cove Road, North Sea, Suffolk County, New York, discovered the remains of Sandra Costello. Date of birth 8/25/1965. The victim, who had been 28 years old at the time, was lying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head, with her uncovered legs spread apart. The victim's shirt had been pulled up over her torso and head, exposing the victim's breast. The victim had numerous sharp force injuries to her inter alta, her face, torso, breast, left thigh, and vaginal area. Miss Costello was a native of Trinidad and Tobago, but had been living in New York prior to her disappearance and murder. From the victim's remains. Hair recovered from the remains of Sandra Costello. During the course of the 1993 investigation, Ms. Costella's body was examined by a forensic scientist with the SCCL, which led to the recovery of, inter alia, 3 hairs from the victim's remains. One from the victim's right arm, hereinafter as female hair on Costella, one from a tape lift of the striped shirt above the victim's head, hereinafter as male hair on Costella, as well as one from a tape lift of the white shirt above the victim's hair, hereinafter unidentified female hair on Costella, collectively the hairs on Costella. In 2014, well before the identification of Rex A. Heuermann as a suspect in Miss Costella's murder, the hairs on Costella were sent to Forensic Laboratory Number 2, which was able to develop unique mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Costella. On or about August 1st, 2014, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 recovered an extract of John Bitroff's buccal swab. Forensic Laboratory Number 2 was then able to develop a mitochondrial DNA profile from John Bitroff's buccal swab and subsequently compared it to the mitochondrial DNA profiles that had been previously generated for each of the hairs on Costella. At the conclusion of its analysis, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 was able to exclude John Bitroff and his maternal relatives as contributors of the hairs on Costella. Recently, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force requested Forensic Laboratory Number 2 undergo forensic testing, specifically comparing mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Costella, which had been developed back in 2014 prior to Heuermann emerging as a suspect in Miss Costella's murder. 2 known samples provided by the Gilgo Homicide Task Force. Recently, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force requested Forensic Laboratory Number 2 undergo forensic testing, specifically comparing mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Costella, which had been developed back in 2014 prior to Heuermann emerging as a suspect in Ms. Costella's murder, to known samples provided by Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force. On or about February 29, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair on Costella and the profile developed from defendant's buccal swabs are the same, specifically at a rate that would, as per the EMPOP database, exclude 99.96% of the North American population as the contributor of the aforementioned hair recovered on the mutilated remains of Sandra Costella. Based on the foregoing, while 99.96% of the North American population can be excluded as the contributor of the male hair on Costella, defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as the contributor of the male hair on Costella. Prior to Miss Costella's disappearance and murder, defendant Heuermann had been living with a female individual whose identity is known to law enforcement hereinafter as Witness 3. During the course of this investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force was able to secure a buccal swab from Witness 3, which was secured via her consent. On or about March 29, 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a DNA extract of Witness 3's buccal swab to Forensic Laboratory Number 2 for further analysis. On or about May 8, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from Witness 3's buccal swab and the profile developed from the female hair on Costella, quote, share a common base at all compared positions, specifically at a rate that would, as per the EMPOP database, exclude 99.98% of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered on the mutilated remains of Sandra Costella. While 99.98% of the North American population can be excluded as the contributor of the female hair on Costella, Witness 3, who had but no longer resided at target residence prior to Miss Costella's disappearance and murder, cannot be excluded as the contributor of said hair recovered on Miss Costella. On or about March 8, 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the hairs on Costella as well as a DNA extract of the Witness 3's buccal swab to Forensic Laboratory Number 1 for further independent analysis. On or about April 29, 2024, Forensic Laboratory Number 1 issued a report indicating its ability to develop a nuclear DNA profile for the male hair on Costella. Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was then able to conduct a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile, developed from male hair on Costella, to Rex A. Heuermann's SNP genotype file, developed from his buccal swab, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the male hair on Costello, which was recovered from Miss Costello's mutilated remains, is 4.347 times 10 to the 332nd power times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex A. Heuermann's SNP genotype file than from any unrelated individual. There was a footnote on that. It says the standard notation for 4.347 times 10 to the 332nd power is 4,347 with 329 zeros thereafter. The investigation into the contributor of the unidentified female hair on Costello remains ongoing. Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was also able to generate nuclear DNA profiles from not only the extract of Witness 3's buccal swab, but also the female hair on Costello. Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was then able to conduct a one-to-one autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile developed from Witness 3's buccal swab to the SNP genotype file developed from the female hair on Costello, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the female hair on Costello is 4.578 times 10 to the 1040 power times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Witness 3's SNP genotype file than from any unrelated individual. Based on the foregoing, it is significant that the two forensic laboratories have now independently determined that male hair recovered from the mutilated remains of Sandra Costello is substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identified to defendant Heuermann's mitochondrial and nuclear profiles. Additionally, both laboratories were able to forensically tie Witness 3, who had resided at the target residence prior to Miss Costello's disappearance and murder, to the female hair recovered on Miss Costello's remains. The foregoing provides further support that Rex A. Heuermann mutilated, murdered, and transported the body of Sandra Costello to Southampton. The chart below summarizes the results from Forensic Laboratory Number 1 and Forensic Laboratory Number 2, which each individually have been able to determine the hairs recovered on now 5 of the 6 charged victims are forensically tied to defendant Heuermann, members of his immediate family, or individuals with whom Heuermann resided, lending further support to the conclusion that defendant Heuermann is the individual who murdered, stripped, restrained, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costello, as well as the Gilgo Four, until they were each discovered in 1993, 2003, 2010, and 2011. Okay, now we have a chart. And the chart reads, it tells us right here, this row is the victim. This row is the designation in bell letter. This row is the proximate location of hair recovery. This row is the mitochondrial DNA results. And this row is the nuclear or SNP DNA results. So for victim Sandra Costello, there was a male hair on Costello. It was located from a tape lift of striped shirt above victim's head. The mitochondrial DNA results are 99.96 of North American population can be excluded, but not Rex Heuermann. The nuclear DNA results are 4.347 times 10 to the 132nd power times more likely to come from an individual with the identical genetic profile as Rex Heuermann. For victim Sandra Costello, there was a female hair on Costello, and it was located on the victim's right arm. It's 99.98% of North American population can be excluded, but not witness number 3. And the nuclear DNA results are 4.578 times 10 to the 1040 times power times more likely to come from an individual with an identical genetic profile as witness number 3. For victim Jessica Taylor, there was a male hair underneath Taylor. It was located on a surgical drape underneath the victim. The mitochondrial DNA results are 99.96% of North American population can be excluded, but not Rex Heuermann. And the nuclear DNA results are 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power times more likely to come from an individual with the identical genetic profile as Rex Heuermann. For victim Maureen Brainerd Barnes, there was a female hair located on Barnes. It was located at the buckle of the belt restraining the lower body. The mitochondrial DNA results are non-applicable, and the nuclear DNA results are 7.9 trillion times more likely to come from an individual with an identical genetic profile as Asa Ellerup. Victim Megan Waterman, first of two female hairs on Waterman, located outside head area. The mitochondrial DNA is 99.69% of the North American population can be excluded, but not Asa Ellerup or Victoria Huerman. And the nuclear DNA results are 2.374 times 10 to the 48th power times more likely to come from an individual with an identical genetic profile as Asa Ellerup. We have Megan Waterman again, second of two female hairs on Waterman. It was found tape in the area of the head. The mitochondrial DNA results are non-applicable. The nuclear DNA results are 2.778 times 10 to the 480 power times more likely to come from an individual with an identical genetic profile as Asa Ellerup. Megan Waterman, there was a male hair on Megan Waterman. It was located on the bottom portion of the burlap sack. Its mitochondrial DNA results are 99.96 of the North American population can be excluded, but not Rex Huerman. And the nuclear DNA results are 1.408 times 10 to the 169 power times more likely to come from an individual with the identical genetic profile, same as Rex Huerman. And then victim Amber Costello, there was a female hair on Costello. It was located from tape in the area of the head. The mitochondrial DNA results are 99.98% of North American population can be excluded, but not Asa Ellerup or Victoria Huerman. Nuclear results are 4.654 times 10 to the 63rd power times more likely to come from an individual with the identical genetic profile as Victoria Huerman. Huerman's unfettered access to target residence during the disappearance and murder of Miss Sandra Costello. As noted, SERPA, based on post-arrest interviews with witnesses, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that witness number 3 and defendant Huerman began living together at target residence in 1991. In September 1993, approximately 2 months before Miss Costello's disappearance and murder, witness number 3 moved out of target residence. Prior to witness 3 leaving target residence, Huerman's mother had moved out of target residence. Based on the foregoing, neither Huerman's mother nor witness 3 were living at target residence during the time of Sandra Costello's murder. Accordingly, the murders of all 4 charged victims and now the murders of Miss Taylor and Miss Costello occurred at times when defendant Huerman would have had unfettered time to execute his plans for each victim without any fear that his family or others residing at target residence would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. Newly discovered digital evidence. As detailed in Exhibit A, following Huerman's arrest, numerous search warrants were executed at target residence, which culminated in inter alta seizure of over 350 electronic devices. In the months subsequent to Huerman's arrest, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has attempted to extract and analyze data from each of these devices. An analysis of these devices has revealed Huerman's significant collection of violent, bondage, and torture pornography, currently dating back to 1994. These pornographic images accessed by Huerman include, but are not limited to, breast mutilation, vaginal torture, sex substitution, i.e., penetration with an object, the sexualization of decapitated women, bondage and whipping, which notably and largely coincide with how the remains of Sandra Costello, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack were discovered. Remember, Valerie Mack is the new victim. Moreover, during the analysis of a hard drive recovered from the basement of Huerman's residence, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force recently discovered a Microsoft Word document entitled HK 2002-04. The document was discovered in unallocated space. Unallocated space refers to stored data that a computer is using. Files are that viewable and able to be opened by a user. And that does say files are that viewable and able to be opened by a user. On the other hand, unallocated space refers to available or unstructured data which is not readily viewable and able to be opened by a user. Unallocated space frequently contains room for, quote, new data or, quote, old data that has been deleted. Since the, quote, recycle bin, overwritten, etc., for example, when a user deletes data, many users believe the file has been purged forever. However, quote, deleting a file only tells the computer that the space previously occupied by that file is now available. The, quote, deleted data will remain in unallocated space until another file is written over it. Data contained within unallocated space can be retrieved via a computer forensic extraction method called file carving. A forensic analysis of HK 2002 to 2004 document reveals that it was not only a locally crafted document, i.e., not downloaded from the internet, but also recovered from a hard drive that indicates it was utilized by Huerman itself. While the original document appears to have been created in 2000 based on its original title, HK 2002-03, the iteration of the Word document titled HK 2002-04 appears to have been created and modified between 2001 and 2002. Based on the foregoing and the facts set forth infra, the task force members believe 2000 or 2002 to be a reference to calendar years. The task force members also believe, based on the foregoing and the facts set forth infra in the Microsoft Word document, to be a, quote, planning document utilized by Huerman to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills, hereinafter referred to as HK planning document, attached hereto as Exhibit B. The HK planning document begins with a 4-category section with the underlined headings of, quote, problems, quote, supplies, quote, DS, and, quote, TRG. See embedded excerpt on the following page. So this is the document, HK 2002-04. In the category problems, it says DNA, tire marks, bloodstains, fingerprints, M-O plastic bag cat litter, witness, trace source of supplies, foot shoe prints, photos, question mark, misleaders, question mark, police stop, truck stop, fingerprints in gloves, plastic bags matched to box, hair and fiber. Supplies, booties, lye or acid, police scanner, rope dash cord, saw dash cutting tools, hair nets, photo film, Duran can, foam drain cleaner, body wash wipes, tarps and drop cloths, medical gloves, bags, tape, large electric or ELC clips, ratched cargo strap, DS, possibly drop site, says DS1 Mill Road, DS2 question mark, dumpster site, next time recon dumpster locations. And then TRG, I'm assuming that's target. T1 Megan question, small is good. TUNK black. That's interesting. Based on the Gilgo Homicide Task Force's training and experience, the members believe, quote, problems to be a guide on issues to avoid apprehension, supplies to be a reference to what supplies are needed to carry out the serial murders to avoid apprehension and to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. The DS heading appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by, inter alta, the discoveries of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor at 2 separate, quote, dump sites, i.e., the vicinity of Mill Road and Ocean Parkway. Under that same heading is a note regarding dumpster site, which the task force members believe is a reference of how Huerman disposed of physical evidence in the manner described infra. See, quote, dispose of the following section below. TRG appears to be a reference to target or victim. See embedded image below. It is important to note that the known victims thus far are all petite women which consist with the smallest good entry in the document, lending further support to the aforementioned conclusion that TRG refers to victims or, quote, targets. And it tells us DS1 Mill Road, DS2 question marks dumpster site is what's in red boxes here. And then in blue boxes, TRG, T-1 Megan question mark, small is good. Up here, there is a notation that says no alterations other than the additional of call-out boxes were applicable have been made to excerpts of the HK planning document. The document is portrayed in the same manner that it was recovered from in unallocated space with no changes in format or spelling. Back down here, with regards to the, quote, DS section of this document, it is important to note that the human remains of Jessica Taylor discovered in 2003, as well as the remains of Valerie Mack discovered in 2000, were dumped in two locations. One of these locations being the vicinity of Mill Road, which is listed as, quote, DS-1 Mill Road in the above Word document. On March 29, 2011, Ms. Taylor's torso, skull, and hands were recovered near Ocean Parkway, i.e., a second, quote, dump site. On April 4, 2011, Ms. Mack's skull, hands, and right foot were also recovered near Ocean Parkway, also a second, quote, dump site. The recent discovery of this document prompted the April 2024 cadaver search of the Manorville area, which did not yield the recovery of additional sets of human remains, thereby reinforcing the task force members' belief that the HK planning document refers to Huerman's preparations for either Jessica Taylor and or Valerie Mack. The HK planning document on Huerman's computer then delves into a three-category section with the headings of, quote, PRE-PREP, quote, PREP, and, quote, post-event. See embedded excerpt below. For the title, quote, PRE-PREP, which I'm going to assume that means pre-preparation, it says VEHCINSP, which I'm going to assume is vehicle inspection. This one says engage T-1. This one says recon DS-1. This one says locate DS-2. Weather report, recon video cams, recon pick zone for video cams. Preparation, set up stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, hard point. Post-event, destroy file, change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics, have story set. Wow. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe, quote, PRE-PREP to be a guide on steps to take in advance of a homicide, i.e., inspecting his vehicle, engaging the target, conducting a recon. And that's footnoted. Recon is commonly utilized as a shorthand for the word reconnaissance, which means to survey or research a specific area in order to ascertain particular strategic features. Conducting a recon or survey of video surveillance cameras in pertinent areas, including the, quote, pick zone, i.e., location where a victim's picked up, and checking the weather to ensure for optimal conditions. Quote, prep, on the other hand, appears to be in reference to steps taken closer in time to homicide, i.e., setting up the, quote, staging area, quote, holding area, and, quote, table crossbar hard point for the victim. Specifically, the, quote, prep section has 5 entries: set up stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, and hard point. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members are aware that a crossbar is often placed underneath tables to provide further structural support for heavier objects being placed on a table. Additionally, the task force members are also aware that a, quote, hard point refers in the field of sexual suspension bondage. Additionally, the task force members are also aware that a, quote, hard point refers in the field of sexual suspension bondage to a fixed attachment point in the ceiling that supports the weight of an individual being suspended off the ground, which is corroborated by Huerman's significant interest in pornography, where the subject is either suspended, tortured, bound to a table, decapitated, and or their breasts are mutilated, which is consistent with the foregoing notations regarding suspension as well as the condition of the victims described herein. Additionally, quote, post-event appears to reference a checklist of tasks following the event or homicide to avoid apprehension, i.e., destroy, SIC file, change tires, burning gloves, dispose of pics, taken of the victim, and quote, have story set, example, alibi story for family upon their return or law enforcement should an inquiry be made. The HK planning document continues to further expand on preparatory measures such as specific recon steps taken, see recon reports, and, quote, take down / pick up sections embedded below, packaging a body for transport, see body prep section embedded below, and steps to inhibit victim identification, avoid leaving behind DNA evidence, quote, see body prep, and, quote, dispose of the following sections embedded below. And below it tells us recon reports. Number 1, vid cams on right 112 to RIT 110 equals 33 old. 2, vid cams on SS Parkway, route 231 to exit 30 equals 10 old. Number 3, T1 info cell 917-294-4402, beep voicemail 917-898-9854 old. I'm assuming that's going to be 2 locations of video cameras on roads that he was taken to meet the victims, and then that's the target's cell phone. Takedown pickup, hunt too long, seen an area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Recon for video cameras in pickup area next time. This document, body prep, says wash body inside and all cavities. Remove trace evidence, fingerprints, and hair. Remove trace DNA. Remove ID marks, tattoos, marks, etc. Remove marks from torture. Remove head and hands. Package for transport. Dispose of the following: tools and devices, target one's clothes and personal items, drop clothes, wipes and towels, props, toys, and wood items, anything that touched target one, what you wore, destroy book and computer files, burn gloves, dispose of box of plastic bags to avoid trace. The, quote, body prep section above includes a note to, quote, remove head and hands, which clearly relates to the condition of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack's remains, as both victims were decapitated and dismembered at their arms below their elbows. Additionally, each of these victims' remains, as well as the remains of the Gilgo Four, were indeed packaged for transport, as this section indicates to do, further increasing the significance of this document's presence on the Huerman's laptop computer. Finally, this section also includes a note to, quote, remove ID marks, tattoos, SIC. As noted supra, the examination of Miss Taylor's body in July 2003 indicated numerous sharp, quote, linear injuries to the victim's skin, specifically around where Miss Taylor's tattoo had been located, which investigators believe was intended to inhibit the identification of Miss Taylor's tattoo and therefore Miss Taylor in a manner consistent with the HK planning document. Furthermore, the, quote, dispose of the following section is list destroy computer files as a checklist item. The presence of this HK planning document in unallocated space demonstrates Huerman's efforts to destroy or delete computer files in a manner that is consistent with this notation. As set forth in Exhibit A, a consistent theme of Huerman's computer activity is the use of forensic wiping software, inter alia, in a manner that is consistent with this notation in the HK planning document. In the, quote, things to remember section, there are notes indicating steps to take, quote, next time, i.e., considering a hit to the face or neck, quote, next time, or using heavier rope for the neck as the, quote, light rope broke under stress of being tightened. See embedded image below. Hewerman further opines on the importance of sleep to not only avoid, quote, problems, but also increase what Hewerman refers to as, quote, playtime. Things to remember. Sound travels, i.e. bird outside. Control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Get sleep before hunt. Too tired creates problems. Hit harder. Too many hit to take down. Consider a hit to the face or neck next time for takedown. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime.
Use push pins to hang drop cloths from ceiling.
Not tape. Use heavy rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. As set forth above and embedded here below, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe these references to, quote, next time indicate Hewerman's prior experiences and what changes to implement moving forward. Take down pickup, hunt too long, seen in area too long, remember don't charge gas, recon for video cameras and pickup area next time. Moreover, the references in the things to remember section utilize push pins
To hang drop cloths
from ceiling and not tape, as well as manifested concerns regarding sound travel indicate the reference incidents would have occurred indoors and likely inside of target residence, which is a, quote, controlled environment that Hewerman would not only be familiar with, but also an area where Hewerman would have access to said tools and supplies.
drop cloths
Would also serve the twin purpose of limiting the spread of forensic evidence such as blood to a confined area, as well as controlling sound travel, which would lead to more, quote, playtime, which is believed to be in reference to sexual and mutilation acts perpetrated on victims. Additionally, with Hewerman's family vacationing outside of the state, defendant would have unfettered time and exclusive access to the target residence, allowing defendant Hewerman ample opportunity to execute and clean up after these crimes. Finally, the HK planning document on Hewerman's laptop computer includes a, quote, notes section, see embedded image below. Notes: spur of the moment, cover, Stockholm Syndrome. The more you do, the more clues you give. Look at the painting. What, why, who. Organized versus disorganized. Page 162, sex substitution. Page 163, page 175, mutilation equals disorganized. The investigation to date has established the source of these notes, i.e. Mindhunter paperback book authored by John Douglas, specifically the first edition published in 1996 concerning the criminal profiling of serial killers. And it gives us a notation. John Douglas is a retired special agent and profiler from the FBI who spent over 25 years in the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. During his time with the FBI, Douglas interviewed over a dozen serial killers and other violent sexual offenders, which led to numerous publications, including the Mindhunter book. Now it continues on to excerpts. Page 162, sex substitution, page 163. Page 162 of said book does indeed reference sex substitution, i.e. penetration with an object, as Douglas describes the rather horrible sexual mutilation and masturbation over the victim's body, but no intercourse. The penetration with the umbrella and pin were acts of sexual substitution. On page 163, Douglas opines that the perpetrator of such a crime, i.e. sex substitution, would be a disorganized killer who would be, quote, compulsive and perhaps, quote, living with his parents. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning document is consistent with the aforementioned book in page number and subject matter. The notes section of the HK planning document also includes the following notation. Page 175, mutilation equals disorganized. In page 175 of the first edition Mindhunter book, Douglas describes a woman's screams and shortly thereafter how the woman's throat had been cut and her naked body mutilated. Douglas further asserts on page 175 of said book that mutilation is a sign of, quote, disorganized personality type. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning document is again consistent with the aforementioned book in page number and subject matter. The quote notes section of the HK planning document also contains the following notation. Quote, look at the painting. What, why, and who. On page 19 of said book, Douglas notes that while he was still at the FBI, he always advised his agents, quote, if you want to understand the artist or the perpetrator, you have to look at the painting, the victim. We've looked at many paintings over the years and talked extensively to the most, quote, accomplished, quote, artist. Accordingly, the note above contained in Huerman's laptop computer to, quote, look at the painting, yet again points to the aforementioned book as the source of Huerman's commentary. Finally, the other notations contained in the HK planning document, i.e., spur of the moment, cover, Stockholm syndrome, the more you do, the more clues you give, are also each contained in said book, all pointing to it as the source of Huerman's notation. Stockholm syndrome is a psychological condition that explains why victims or hostages can sometimes develop a psychological bond or empathy for their captor or abuser. The foregoing is corroborated in part by Huerman's possession of other serial killer books authored by John Douglas. During the initial search warrant execution in July 2023 at Target residence, the task force observed that Huerman possessed in his home office the book entitled, quote, The Cases That Haunt Us. See embedded image below, which outlines the facts, evidence, and victimology of several notable serial murder cases. And that's that book. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that the totality of circumstances surrounding the HK planning document, including Huerman's attempt to delete its existence, points to it as Huerman's self-education and, quote, homework on the topic of carrying out serial sexual murder. Huerman's pointed concerns regarding 1. Avoiding being captured on video surveillance, 2. Leaving behind forensic evidence, 3. What supplies to purchase, 4. How to package a body for subsequent transport to, quote, dump sites, example, wash body inside and all cavities prior to, quote, package for transport, 5. Avoiding, quote, paper trail, tying him to crimes and or crime scenes, example, remember don't charge gas, 6. Concerns regarding noise and or air travel, which could inhibit, quote, playtime. And 7. How to, quote, improve, quote, next time. Further confirm merely by looking within the four corners of the document itself its relevance in this regard. This belief is further corroborated when looking at a litany of external factors, including inter alia, how the 6 victims now attributable to Huerman were indeed, quote, packaged and, quote, transported, and in the case of Miss Taylor, how her head, hands, and tattoo were removed and or obliterated, consistent with the document's instructions. Furthermore, an analysis of Huerman's computers confirmed the HK planning document was in an, quote, unallocated space and had hence been deleted, which is consistent with not only the, quote, destroy computer files notation, but also Huerman's established use of forensic wiping software. Penalties. If convicted on the current charges, defendant Rex A. Huerman faces multiple sentences of life without parole. Remand without bail is appropriate. Based on the serious, heinous nature of these serial murders, the strength of the people's case, the life incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extreme measures this defendant took to attempt to avoid apprehension for over a decade, and the defendant's indictment on these additional charges, which now incorporate a 5th and 6th victim, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure the defendant's return to court is to remand the defendant without bail. Dated June 6, 2024, Suffolk County, New York. And it's signed says Exhibit A, previously filed on a different page, but it doesn't give us anything. Exhibit B, and again, this is his document that we read over. It continues. And that's it. I want to thank you for hanging out with me and letting me read this document to you. If you want this document, it is on my Discord, which I will link in the description box below. I know that was hard to listen to. It's absolutely mind-blowing, and I will keep up to date on this case as much as I can to bring you the documents and information as I get them. Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us get out into the algorithm, and by hitting that subscribe button, you become part of the speculating family. I do have lives every day at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time if you would like to come and participate in that. We have open conversations, and a lot of times they are very thought-provoking streams. Have a good day.